Hi, I'm Jo Sparrow, President of Jigsaw Queensland, host of the Adopt Perspective podcast. Today's guest is Bev Shipway. In 1979, at just 17 years old, gave birth to her son at the King Edward Memorial Hospital in Western Australia. What followed was not simply adoption, it was a coordinated process that Bev now describes as the system. In a submission to the Western Australian Inquiry into the past forced adoption practices, detailed the red triangles on her hospital file that marked her baby for adoption, the denial of access to her newborn, the pressure to consent under distress, and a justice of the peace who warned her that she would go to jail if she ever spoke about what had happened. Bev's story is about coercion, secrecy, institutional collusion, repeated trauma, and the long shadow that those events have cast over a lifetime. Bev joins us today not only as a mother separated from her son, but as a woman who has spent decades examining the records, questioning the system, and asking, how did this happen and how do I heal from it? How's it going, Bev? Welcome to the podcast.
Morning, Jo. It's fine. Beautiful day over here in WA.
Well, that's good. It's a bit cloudy here in Queensland.
I thought it was sunny there all the time.
Yeah, that's what the myth is, isn't it?
Oh, it's a nice place in the world, but
Bev, you've written that you were 17, pregnant and naive by your own admission, and that somewhere along the way you unknowingly entered what you now call the system. Can you take us back to the time that you were pregnant and tell us about that?
I was from the country, so I didn't have much how the world worked. It was a very small circle of people that I'd ever mixed with. And I had failed year 11, so I was in business college in Perth, and I discovered I was pregnant. Yeah, was pregnant. And it was, okay, how am I going to deal with this? So I told my sister, and she said, Mum can't find out. Lived with my sister. And so, all right, I didn't tell my mother. I told the father. I was still with him, and he wasn't really that in on it. And I continued being pregnant until one day my sister said, I have to tell. She must have said, you're telling enough now. I'm going to tell Mum. Next thing I knew, my mother was there, and she'd wrenched me back to the country farm, and I was subjected to raw fury, rage. How could you do this? Also, you could go to jail for carnal knowledge. I didn't know what carnal knowledge was. And I said, why? What? And she said, because he's 16. Yeah, he was 10 months younger than me or something. So I just knew that it was really bad. So that was sort of the first big thing. And then I was taken out of business college and made to live on the farm. I wasn't allowed to come out of my room or see anybody. When she came down, she took me over to the doctor and she wanted a termination, but I knew that it was too late to have termination. I was about 5 months pregnant by then. And so I stayed at the farm. Then at some stage I went to my elder sister's who was married, and she had young children, but I didn't stay there very long. So I don't know what the purpose of that was. And Mum constantly harassed me and told me that I couldn't have the baby. What would everybody say, and what would the baby's father's parents say? They all lived in the same town, and this went on and on and on. And she kept saying, well, no, it's okay. I just want my baby. And eventually she started talking about adoption as a solution, I guess, looking back from adults' eyes. So one day I said, okay, Mum, all right, because it had become unbearable. So she said, all right, go and ring them. So I went and got the phone book, rang them, the old dial phones, and made an appointment to see them. The next thing, and then I really can't remember a lot around there. Then I had this interview with what I now know was a social worker. And she just kept saying how adoption was the big answer and how the baby needed two parents, blah, blah, blah. And all of it I could refute because I knew adoptees who their father had been killed, so they didn't have two parents. I knew other adults who had adopted children who were separated. So I think she found me a bit frustrating because she really got quite angry. And eventually she proposed what was a bastardization of open adoption is how I think of it now. Well, you can just give your baby to somebody else and it'll just be like you looking after them, but it'll be better. And you've got 5 years to change your mind or make your mind up.
Okay.
And with that, I said, okay, I will consider that. But yeah, I really not enamoured with the idea of adoption because I want my baby. So left there. Can't remember any other communications or conversations with anybody. I went into antenatal, call them antenatal. Oh, they weren't antenatal checkups. Not when you think of an antenatal checkup when you're having subsequent children.
Hmm.
It was medical checks. That's all they were. One day I went in, the doctor was who did the check. It was a horrible experience. They used to call you out by numbers, and it was in, I'm sure they must have had a special room at King Edward where all those naughty girls went because it was dingy and dark, and there was a seat, and you got called out by numbers, not by names.
Yeah. Gosh, there was so much judgment coming at you from every corner, wasn't there, Bev?
Well, it was in retrospect, Joe. Yes, it was a slow societal conditioning to submit and devalue. Yeah, I spoke to another mother who also was at King Edwin. She said, "I know, Bev, I was there, so it wasn't only me." Um, and yeah, I find it really hard to understand how a caring profession, or who profess to be caring, could actually be part of something as abhorrent as what they were doing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this day I went in for my appointment and the doctor he was really agitated. He just wanted to confirm dates. Are you sure? You sure? You sure? You sure? Yes, I am. Then I didn't know what he did, but he stripped my membranes and slapped the pad on and said, "Go home, you'll have the baby within 24 hours." True to his
When
word,
he was saying, Bev, can I just ask, when he was saying, are you sure? What was he asking? What were you sure about?
are you sure about the dates of my last period?
Right. Okay.
So he just, I guess he wanted to know whether the baby was cooked enough to bring it on, I suppose. I don't know. But later I found that in my records, I do think there was something fishy about why he wanted for the baby to be born in that time frame. So yeah, but as far as the triangles, hadn't actually thought much about it until I got my records, Joe. And littered throughout them were all these triangles.
So just like on the front of files and stuff, little triangles with, did they have anything else?
Through
Just little red triangles or?
Well, the red triangles weren't in the copies, Joe. They were black and white, so there was no colour on them. But they were tiny triangles, like the same size as writing. But for example, one of them was consider early epidural with a triangle in brackets beside it. What does that mean? And then all through it was social worker or SW and the social worker's name. And sometimes there were big arrows pointing attention to this triangle. The main one is that I think me determined that it was adoption was about the early epidural because in an adult mind, I could see there was no reason if it was because of having negative blood, which is what I'd thought. Because during all the times going to antenatal, it was the person who would hand the file to the doctor, like a manila file. This was back in the olden days. And it had this big triangle on the front. And in case you didn't see it, this is speaking from an adult looking at it. That in rewind, she's a triangle.
Yeah.
And
And, I've heard from so many women that their files all over them have like BFA or some other symbol or indication that
yeah,
all along it had been decided their baby was for adoption long before they'd ever signed any paperwork.
when I got my records, the first ultrasound, which was from the GP that my mother had taken me to try and get a termination, it had on there she will consider adopting the baby or something. Point I'd never said anything, so that to me was an entry point for people whose parents were unsupportive. I think that was probably something that underscored a lot of the experiences
Yeah.
that their parents they weren't on board with it and they didn't go to fight for them.
Do you believe that staff that you encountered treated you differently because of that mark, Bev?
Yes, Joe. Yes. One of the things that I really have a problem with, and it's up there with having this perception, or I felt that I had to prove to the staff or the social worker after I had given birth that I was good enough, I was a fit person to parent. One of the things that's right up there with that is that mother birthing is really a sacred experience for women, and to not have been given any heads up or any preparation is crime against their soul, the people who all participated. That crossing from mother to maiden is something that we only ever do once,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
was taken. And I feel really that's what hurts. I never had it with any of my other children. I was too scared to go out and celebrate, too scared to. My husband wanted to tell my mother-in-law, and I just didn't want to. I just shrunk away. I was petrified.
Yeah. Can you tell us about the delivery of your son, whatever you're comfortable saying?
Oh, my girlfriend and her mum took me into the emergency department. They didn't say anything. It was all mechanical. It was, be quiet. "Oh, well, it can't hurt much. Yeah, I'm just going to give you an injection for this or that." And then eventually I was taken into the labour ward. I was lucky I didn't have student doctors. I can't actually remember the obstetrician. I'll call him that, the person who was delivering the baby. I can remember it was horrendously painful. Horrendously painful. My mother appeared out of nowhere. My sister must have rang her and she must have come down from the farm and she sat at my head. I had cordial to drip and eventually I had an epidural. And all I remember about that, he must have been nice because he's the only person I can remember out of the whole lot of people who were there. And when I looked him up years later, because I could just see his name badge, he's now a plastic surgeon. So I think that on somebody to go to anesthesiology, to cosmetology, it must have done something to him as well.
Yeah.
So, and then it was a forceps delivery, and it was a total epidural, so I couldn't, I just had a thing on my shoulder. They used to come and top up, and I couldn't walk. And then when he was born, the doctor asked me if I said, "Do you want to see the baby?" Of course I wanted to see my baby, but Mum was there, so I looked at her and she said no. And afterwards I asked her if she saw him. She said, "Yeah, I did. He's just like his bloody father. Lanky bloody his father." Well, I had looked and all I could see was a hand and it's just about blunt. I didn't know anything about babies. When I got my records, I found out that I'd also been given morphine.
Mm.
And they were so determined to take this baby away that they'd given me enough morphine that it took 6 minutes to establish breathing. And he was intubated for 8 minutes with APGARs of, I think it was 1, 3, and the last one was 9. It took a long time for him to come up. And on that, it's clear, on the records, it clearly states that it was fear effects. So there was no imagination required to see what it had been attributed to. When I'd had my subsequent son, I'd had pethidine just before he was delivered, and that he was very flat, and he'd had to have Narcan. So I sort of could look at the records with actually a conscious experience as a reference point. But my son later was not black. He was pink like a normal baby. I only wonder sometimes in those dark moments where I just can't reconcile it all in my head. I wonder if it was done so they could pretend that if I had have wanted to see him, he was going to be alive. So they didn't have to have this problem person who didn't want to comply with what they wanted to do.
Yeah. You said to me years later when you read your medical records, there was something that really shook you in there, and it sort of made sense with that timing of the intervention with the sweeping of your membranes and getting that labour going. What did you see in your files on the same day that the labour was induced?
The statement that the Department of Community Welfare, that's what it was called back then, had been prepared on that day, and it
What's that
was
statement?
to support the application to adopt. It's presented to the court with all the documentation to support somebody else parenting my child. And to me, it was significant because I hadn't actually given birth when it was dated. And that should have been enough for the judge to say, hang on, this was this was well before any consent had been given or anything. So I think it should have been damning instead of supportive. And the other things there was other things, but those I won't go into them, Joe. They're a bit, but I do believe there was other forces at play to do with staff on the hospital. In my records, my baby had a double-barreled Christian name, and the second name, which only stayed on the neonatal notes for 12 hours or 24 hours, dated daily, was the same name as his adoptive father.
Right.
So we can't get past them. I
Yeah.
I can't get past that, and his adoptive mother shared the same birthday,
It's a
so
lot of
I
coincidences, isn't there?
there's a
Yeah.
lot of coincidences, Joe, yes, and combined with hearing King Edward staff speaking to the inquiry over here when they gave their evidence session, they were very proud. They couldn't find any records, or not many records, but they did find this box of adoptive parents' names. They were very happy with that, for finding that. They were, even this day and age, they were still could not see the mismatch with what they were saying. Anyway, that's as it is. It is what it is.
Yeah. Were you permitted to hold your son, Bev?
Not at the time. No, I asked the social worker lots of times, that I want my baby. And she just kept saying, no, you can't have him. He won't bond with his new parents and blah, 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 blah.
Oh,
And I just, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Go on, Joe.
I'm just thinking about when I had my first son, and the sleep deprivation that I experienced, and so much going on. I was certainly not in a position or mind frame where I could have made any long-term decisions regarding anything. What effect did being in that state of mind and the repeated visits of people wanting you to make up your mind have on you? And who was trying to make you make up your mind at that time?
Was only ever the social worker, only ever the social worker. And I just kept getting woken up. And also, I was in different rooms at the hospital, Joe. Like I was in a shared ward, there were other people in it. And then I was in a ward where it was only me, because my sister and her friend came and visited me. So it was very unsettling, very disorienting. Not unsettling, disorienting when I look back, because I'd go to sleep and then I'd be woken up and there'd be this person waking me up, shaking me. Have you made up your mind yet? What do you want to give your baby? What do you want to call your baby? Oh, I've got a name, but just hang on. I'm not quite ready yet. I'm really tired. Hang on. Go back to sleep, I guess. And she'd come back the next time after that. She'd come back. She said, well, we've given your baby a name. We've called him blah. We kept it short and sweet. And I had a name. So that was sort of, I guess, was something that just another thing that for any stable footing I had just ripped it out from and left me floundering.
Yeah.
Um, and
You
eventually
said
she said,
yeah, go on.
sorry, Joe.
No, you go on.
Eventually she kept saying that you can't have your baby. I said, well, if I don't agree to adoption, well, what will happen? And she was adamant that he was going to be made a ward. He would go into foster care and eventually be made a ward of the state. So I had concluded, and then eventually, after lots of these visits that just were like reruns of the same moment in a bad movie, I just said, if you agree to adoption, you can hold your son after you sign. Sorry, I'm trying to put it into thinking about it. And somewhere around about that time, she started saying, you've got to hurry up. It's been 3 days. Your poor baby. You've got to make up your mind. When I got my records, it was just over 24 hours. That was 24 hours to make me capitulate. That was really, really hard for me to accept. But I had agreed in such a short time. I thought it was 3 days until I got my records. And I still don't know whether it was 3 days. And my records were different because there is a period of 45 minutes in just before labour that are missing. So we don't know what's actually been taken out of. And there were no social work records. So yeah, yeah. It is what it is.
Something that really strikes me as an adopted person, I often feel like I'm walking around on a carpet that's sitting on water. Like nothing about my past seems to be concrete or solid or something I can rely on, because just when I think I understand it, something changes. I find out new information and that's something that when I listen to the stories of mothers like yourself, Bev, that stands out for me, that you also were in such a state at the time of birth that when you look back on your records, that it's almost like, well, what's true? Is it what I remembered or what's in these records, or has somebody lied in there? Like it's just interesting to me how I think a lot of adopted people feel the same. It's almost like we share that moment, but for different reasons.
I mean, I never lived in the life of an adopted person, Joe, so I can only go on. I understand
Yeah.
their stories from outside in, not from the inside out. mothers had, and I won't say a normal life because I don't think any of the mothers had some Australians would consider a normal life. There was already a preparation for this moment by the parenting they'd received because their parents would have gone into bat for us. They had children. They knew what it was about. They would never have let it happen if they had have cared for us. So, but we had that split, and yeah, but adopted people they have no reference point, Joe. So I can't imagine what it would be like living like that with the earth moving under you. I used to say after contact, it was like I was on quicksand. Nothing would slow down. Nothing would speed up. It was just this constant, I'm going to sink if I don't do something. I had to keep running. You weren't running. It's like, I can't imagine that. I know. Yeah, it breaks my heart to hear it, Joe. It really does to have that for your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. You said to me the first time we spoke that you felt damned if you did and damned if you didn't. And when we're talking about consent, real consent requires freedom. Do you feel like you were free to make an informed decision?
No, Joe, and no, definitely not. To me, my signature on consent was extorted. It wasn't blackmail, it was extortion. When somebody has an object with value and they gain consent by using that's extortion. That's not blackmail. It's not deceptive consent. That's how I see it. Took me a long time to see it in that light, but that's how I do see it. And at the time I felt damned if I did and damned if I didn't, because if I didn't agree, he was going to go to foster care and he was going to be made a ward of the state. I didn't know any wards of the state, but I did know that that wasn't a good thing. Reviewing records years later was deeper than that. By refusing access, it feared that you'd abandoned your baby. Legislation only required abandonment of the baby for them to be available for adoption. So to all the mothers who have no consent, it was never taken and it was used as another form to make adoption possible.
Yeah. You describe signing the consent form in front of a justice of the peace. What did he say to you about if you ever spoke about the adoption?
Well, I sorry, Joe. I looked at my consent papers only over the top page. I never got any further than that. On the bottom of consent papers, first of all, he made me sign on a Bible. Never signed another paper. Ever since then, had to sign an oath on a Bible. Put my hand on a Bible. But he's signed everything then. But can't remember what he said. All I can remember is him pointing to the bottom of the thing. Now, this here, young lady, you read it out and focused on that if I did anything to make the adoption not go ahead, or if I spoke about it to anybody, or spoke about the adoption to anybody, I'd go to jail. Before I come on here, I was thinking about it, Joe, and I was thinking that was probably when he fulfilled his obligation to give me the revocation form.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can really because it just unravels all the time. It was more about, I was never to talk to anybody, but I was also to not do anything to upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
How long has that silence lived inside of you?
forever, Joe. Forever since then. Still have huge problems dealing with anybody in authority. Yeah, it's this follow inside me feels like it's a latent flame just ready to explode at silly things, but things that we need to be able to do to exist in the society we live in.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know whether that answered your question very well, but
No, I mean, it did. Again, like talking from the shifted perspective to an adopted person, there's a silence around. We had no words to say because there was no space for words. We didn't know what to say. We weren't told we'd suffered a trauma or lost anything. So there's I always felt adoption in the throat, like there's just something that just wants to come out, but there's no words. And for you, you were told to be silent, hold this in, get on with your life, have your own children, things like that. And you had to hold a silence that was completely different, knowing what happened and being forced to be silent about it.
I guess just you're saying that, Joe, probably the better answer, I should have said it lived until contact. And then I was having physio and I spoke to the physio, who was a wonderful physio, and told him, and it was a great witness to say to, and it was the first and really the only time that I've ever said I had 3 children. Was it requires safety to continue that, and I didn't have that safety anywhere.
After you were made to sign, you were finally allowed to hold your son briefly under supervision. What do you remember about that moment?
Sullied like everything else, Joe. I didn't get to hold my baby. The normal mum holds a baby. I'll use normal. It's like an everyday mum or non-affected mum. I had to grub up first, put a gown on, put a mask on, and then I had to sit in a chair with somebody in a chair, maybe 2 metres in front of me, looking at me. That's what I remember, Joe. I don't remember anything good in that moment. And it wasn't, I could hold him for as long as I wanted to. That's enough. Off you go. Okay, sorry.
Be sorry. You okay?
Yeah. No, okay. It's just I don't focus on that too much
Yeah.
because I don't want to lose. I mean, I could have stuff around it and tape, but I don't want to lose that. That's the only thing I've got.
Viv, you discovered at some point that you had the right to revoke consent. What happened when you attempted to do this, and how did you find that out?
Well, I found it out because the community thought I was living back at the farm then, or I wasn't living back there. I'd been taken back there because when I was pregnant, I'd made a life. I had a job. I was independent. After I had him, I'd gone back to the farm and I used to get out my papers and read. So I read an envelope, it's a very tattered envelope with lots of spots on it, which I presume are tears these days. But I never got past the first page because it was just too hard. And anyway, I got this thing and it went to Beacon. We lived on a farm. We had a mail run that used to deliver, and it was addressed to me. So I opened it and it was a receipt for consent. And in there it said all the forms or said what had been received or what had been given or something. And it had revocation. I was reasonably bright, so I knew what revoke meant. So I looked through them and yeah, there was. So I read this paper. All right, I have to do it. All right, get my ass back to Perth. Before I went back to Perth, I was still very hesitant. Wasn't obviously wasn't very courageous. Wasn't a bit of a rebel. I should have been more of a rebel, I think. So eventually, I can do this. I just didn't say anything to anybody because Mum had, even after I'd had him, she'd definitely in no doubt that she still, after I'd been and held him, I told her, I can't do it, Mum. I want my baby. No, I didn't say I can't do it. I said, well, I want my baby. He's got the most beautiful blue eyes. It's this, he said. All babies have blue eyes. What are you on about? So anyway, sorry, I get a bit agitated. So went back to Perth, filled out the form, took it to the postmaster, got it executed. It was in the morning. It was the last day for consent, for revocation. That's how long I procrastinated. Tried to get up courage. Went home, rang up, spoke to whoever I had to speak to in the adoptions department or in community welfare. Rang the phone number I'd been given, I guess, and said, I want my baby. I've got the form signed. You can't have him. Told me, oh, this very inconvenient. Well, I'd get the foster mother to bring him in, blah, 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 blah. It can't be done. I said, no, it can be done. I've got my form. And where do I bring it? She says, it's too late. She says, not, because I've got a calendar. She says, not. It says here, this is the last day of revocation. And where do I bring it to? Because I had a car. I was going to drive in and deliver it. Where do I bring it to? And she wouldn't tell me. And where I'd signed consent, where I'd had to go had changed a few times. So I just lost it and I just gave up. Wasn't very brave, I just said on the form that it had to be delivered to the CEO. Or no, it wasn't the director, I think it was called. I didn't know who the director was, so I didn't believe at that time that I could have given it to the right place. I guess it was heaped on top of everything else that I'd done so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is back in the days pre-internet where we can find anything pretty quick now.
That's what I think often, Joe. It was, you know what, Google Maps will tell me where it is.
Yeah, wasn't the same back then. Bev, I'm so
So
sorry.
thank you for that, Joe, but you never had anything to do with it. The people who should be saying sorry are the people who perpetrated these terrible, terrible things.
You were able to reconnect
Yeah.
with your son. What can you tell us about how that unfolded?
It didn't unfold well, Joe. I first knew about contact being sought by my sister arriving with a little folded up piece of paper, about 2 inches by 1 inch, and handing it to me and saying, he wants to meet you. I just looked at her. He'd been inside speaking to us, and before that, and made up this cock and bull story about she'd come about some computer something stuff. And then when she left, she said, "Can you come outside?" And she told me next to the mailbox outside beside a car. She wanted to make a quick getaway. And I just looked at it and looked at her and said, "What?" Opened it up, and was a letter from Department of Child Protection, they were called then. And it was very explicit, left you no doubt as to what it was about. Gave my son's name that was given at birth, state of birth, everything. And it was addressed to me, care of her address. I had my own address, owned a house with my husband, lived there for many years. And I don't know, it just came, and I'm sorry, I opened, I didn't have my glasses on. Okay, yeah, we do these kind of things. Well, then I sat on it. I come inside and my husband said to me, "Did she give it to you?" "Yes, she did. Do you know?" "Oh, yeah, she come up to me and wanted me to give it to you." She said my sister said that she'd had it for a week. Had been keeping it because my niece's wedding, she didn't want to upset me. When she gave it to me, she said, "Oh, I thought you'd cry." Well, I wasn't going to cry. I was just in shock. Total and utter shock. I'd asked for my name to be put on a contact register in 1984. This was in 2011, so I couldn't get my head around it. And my husband knew, my mother knew, and I never forgave my husband for not telling me. He should have told me. He'd only found out the night before. He should have told me. That's what relationships are about, is having each other's back and knowing there's somebody to hold you. I couldn't forgive anybody. But I found out that somebody had rang in 2002, I think, and had requested some information forms to be sent to an address, and they were never sent back. So that address was never clarified. That was in the country town, me care of this person. Well, the Department of Communities had taken it upon themselves to clarify that address now was in a Perth suburb. Me still care of this person, still never been acknowledged. I later found my mother had registered with Jigsaw my maiden name, care of
In
her
WA,
address.
that is. Yeah.
Jigsaw, oh yes, sorry, Jigsaw WA. My maiden name, care of her address. So they had done everything to intercept any contact, considering they were instrumental in it all going ahead. I guess they'd had a lot of guilt, Joe.
Yeah.
So it was lucky that I even actually met him, because I'd stuffed around for about 6 months doing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I
How
did
did that
meet him.
Yeah, how did that go?
Oh, it's lovely. I mean, we don't have contact now, but it was I don't know how to explain it, Joe. It was yeah, it was just like resuming that bonding as adults, which is a very different kettle of fish. It's like falling in love, but there was no lust. And now I look at it, it's exactly the same as when you have a baby. You just fall in love with them, and they are your sole purpose for being. And so it was great. Did some great things. Not a lot of things, but did some memorable, had some memorable, couple of memorable word. Can't think of it. Went skydiving,
You went
which was,
skydiving. That is memorable,
yeah,
Bev.
it
Wow.
was,
I haven't heard that one before.
it was just, yeah, it was just this time of actually, I felt like the person I would have been if adoption hadn't have taken place. Two things we did was skydiving, which was just amazing, and went to a shooting range and shot handguns.
You didn't mention this the other day, and I'm telling you, I've never heard this in a reading story ever.
That's the kind of person I am, Joe. Yeah.
It's so cool.
Sorry.
No, it's just sometimes I feel like I've heard it all, and then I'm reminded again, no, you have not.
Well, no, no. So it was very special. I have very special memories that I hold now. I feel like I've got resolution, but then we had a falling out, and so I think it was very, very difficult time or someone without support around them, and support from people who either were humble enough to say, hey, I don't know anything about this. You need to talk to somebody else, or people who thought they knew everything about it, knew nothing about it, said, well, this is wrong, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. And as you know, the pressure from, I'm sure I have listened to enough stories to know of the pressure from feeling that you are betraying the people who nurtured you physically. So yeah, very difficult time. And then it floundered, and I'm very sad that after that he got married, he had children. A freaking awesome granny, but I've never met his kids. And because I went through that after my marriage dissolved in all of this, and I was estranged from my daughter and my grandsons. It's very sad to hear them when I reconnected them. They didn't know what happened to you, Gran. I thought you died. And it's not fair to kids to do that to kids. And so while I dearly wanted to see them and that, I pulled back because I can't do that to them.
Bev, I wonder, what does healing look like for you now?
Healing to me, it's like being able to have it sit inside me as something that happened. And for the most part, I can talk about it. I'm at peace with it. I get angry when I'm trying to invoke change and people don't understand. But healing now looks like being able to live relatively peacefully, made peace with it, and it happened. I can't go back, I can't change it. But you know what? I'm still here, and you're a long time dead. So I want to live a little bit. Yes, it's not as free and open as I've had that glimpse of what it could have been without adoption. And I have a lot of weird idiosyncrasies. I hate telephoning anybody now in case they're doing something or I might interrupt them, or I really hate that. Healing looks being able to wake up in the morning without it being the first thing I think of or the last thing I think of before I go to bed.
Yeah,
And
there's
when
something
I'm
in that.
triggered, yeah, that's to healing. And maybe there's another level to it, and maybe I will get there. But at the moment, that's what healing looks like to me. I don't focus on it, and I don't focus on what it's taken or how broken I am. I've got a scar, and sometimes that scar has things that make come up and get a bit angry. It's part of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bev, thank you so much for sharing your story with me and with our listeners today. I know it's going to mean a lot to them. It's going to resonate with a lot of people, and it's a very courageous thing for you to have done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe, for having me. Yeah.
And to everyone tuning in, every story is different and every story matters. And if you're looking for support or resources or just a place to be heard, know that Jigsaw Queensland's here for you. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you can share episodes, like them, give them a review. You can even just email us and let us know what you think about the episodes, because we really love to hear from you. And if you'd like to be a prospective guest on Adopt Perspective, you just need to go to the Jigsaw Queensland website, find a podcast tab there, and then scroll down and you'll find a prospective guest form that you can fill out. And just remember that Adopt Perspective can be listened to by people all over the world. Thank you. I'm Jo Sparrow, President of Jigsaw Queensland. Bye for now.